In our May magazine, we've written an article on the 7th chapter of Revelation. It's a fascinating study. Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me what I might call saints alive.
And JR, when we're talking about saints, we're talking about the 144,000, maybe one of the most disabused subjects in the entire Bible. Much has been said about the 144,000, and much of it, sadly, misapplied, but we're going to look at the identity of the 144,000. More than that, we're going to examine what they mean in terms of the prophetic plan. And JR, let me start by reading chapter 7 of Revelation, verse 1, "And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea." And so this chapter begins with a celestial pause. Everything falls silent. And that means a great deal.
The 6th seal has just been broken. The 7th seal awaits the breaking. Between the 6th and the 7th seal, we have this parenthetical portion that takes us off in a different direction. For example, in the 6th seal, we appear to be approaching the conclusion of the 7-year tribulation period. But in chapter 7, we have backed up to the beginning of the tribulation period. As the angel says, "Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads." That begins before the tribulation sets in. Now, I want us to notice briefly the 4 angels holding the 4 winds of the earth. In the tabernacle of the Old Testament, there was a veil, a blue veil, that covered the Holy of Holies. As one stood in the holy place with the menorah, the 7 golden lampstand on one side, and the table of showbread over against the north wall, and looking toward the west, you would see the golden altar of incense, and beyond that, a blue veil. I think that's what we see here, Gary, as we are looking at the 4 winds of the earth. For on the ancient veil of the tabernacle, woven within the tapestry, were 4 cherubim, or angelic creatures. I think that's what we're looking at here.
Well, JR, to me, that's very evocative, because what it means is if you were to enter the tabernacle and stand in the inner court, you'd be looking at this veil, and if you walked forward toward the veil, you'd be entering into the Holy of Holies. And that entrance into the Holy of Holies, by the way, is the very theme of Revelation, is it not?
Yes. Now, you've got to understand that only the high priest was allowed to enter the Holy of Holies, and then only once a year. So it is a forbidden place, beyond of which there was the Ark of the Covenant representing the throne of God, and the cherubim on top, which represent the cherubim around the throne of God, and the ball of fiery substance that appeared above the Ark of the Covenant on the mercy seat, the glory of God, the presence of God. So beyond the veil is heaven, where God lives and performs His miracles. And so I think that's what we're looking at here. And by the way, the blue sky, which we see all day long, shields us from that forbidden territory out there called outer space.
Absolutely. We're looking into the physical heavens with our physical eyes, but the high priest looked into the spiritual heavens with spiritual eyes. And that's exactly the picture we have as we're now moving forward through the veil into the prophetic fulfillment that lies in the Holy of Holies.
And by the way, when you look at the blue sky, it is a physical representation of the metaphysical, which we are looking at here in Revelation chapter 7. When you look up at the sky all day long on a clear day, you can see a ball of fire up there called the sun. That's the only thing you can see, because the veil shields us from being able to see the stars, the galaxies, and perhaps even the moon. The interesting thing about the sun is that it represents the glory, the Shekinah glory. It is not the glory, it is a physical manifestation of the metaphysical glory of God. And I think that's what we see here. And the angel says to the cherubim, and by the way, I think those are the four beasts that are standing before the throne of God over in chapters 4 and 5. And they were given the power to hurt the earth and the sea. And Gary, we would have to review what they look like now. We've got the lion, we've got the ox, the eagle, and the man. Mm-hmm. And they are the watchers over the various kingdoms of life.
Absolutely. Now, what we have then is, I think, J.R., a suspension of the natural law that governs our everyday life on planet Earth. Today, in the 21st century, as we walk up and down the street and do our business, we are functioning in the sphere of natural law. We have the law of gravity, and we have the natural order of progression in the weather, and so forth and so on. At this time, however, we have a suspension of the natural order. And those four divinely appointed messengers, I think, J.R., are just beginning here to suspend the natural order of things, and we're going to enter into a supernatural order of things when a whole new category of events is going to be unfolded. And, you know, this veil that we've been talking about will be drawn aside.
Yes, and we'll be entering beyond the veil one of these days. That's called the rapture.
Yes.
And resurrection. But I want you to notice something else about this 7th chapter, it being between the 6th and 7th seals. This is a menorah design we have here. And the 7 lamps of the menorah, the center lamp, the 4th one, is elevated above the others. All the other lamps are turned facing the center lamp. The center lamp faces out into the middle of the room. Now, the interesting thing about this is that we have gone through 6 seals and thus 6 lamps. Mm-hmm. The 4th lamp is called the Ner Elohim. It is the lamp of God. But the 7th lamp also has a special meaning and a special Hebrew name, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's called Ner Hamaharavi, or the Western lamp. And you know, J.R., you're facing in that direction as you walk in.
Yes.
To the holy place.
And that western lamp is the one nearest the veil.
Yes, it is.
Now, between the 6th and 7th lamps, we have this parenthetical portion. We have it also between the 6th and 7th trumpets and between the 6th and 7th vial of wrath. In the other 7s of the Bible, I don't see anything between the 6th and 7th. Why the 7th? Why between the 6th and 7th? Well, this 7th lamp, the western lamp, the light from it was used to relight the center lamp when the center lamp was cleaned. Yes. And a new wick put in it. Now, the light from the center lamp was used to light the other lamps. Unless the center lamp was being cleaned, and then the 7th lamp would provide the light to relight the center lamp. Gary, to me, this says that the events of the book of Revelation will happen between the 6th and 7th millennia, after the 6th and at the introduction of the 7th 1,000 years of human history.
And you know, moving west is a theme that really begins in the tabernacle, because when you're headed from the outer court to the inner court to the Holy of Holies, that's your direction. This western lamp is almost a rotational idea. That is, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you clean and refill the 4th, and you go back then and start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 again. And this is what we see in Revelation, a kind of a rotating pattern of 7s.
Now, I want you to notice also that this is in the 7th chapter. And so we would have to look at the 7th letter of the Hebrew alphabet in order to comprehend and understand this. The 7th letter is the Zayin, and it refers to sustenance and struggle and a focal point.
Yes, indeed. And this, I think, is very interesting. We have the letter Zion in the Hebrew alphabet, which is also the numeral 7. And it is the symbol of the saint oppressed from 6 directions, up, down, in front, behind, left, right. He is oppressed. He is the center of, or the very focal point of the battleground, the spiritual struggle. And J.R., how significant is that for chapter 7?
When we look at the fourth lamp of the menorah, we see the one sitting in the center with the six on either side. Now, Rabbi Michael Monk, in his book on the wisdom of the Hebrew alphabet, says that the focal point, the individual, is not a part of the other six. And so we must position ourselves in relation to those things around us.
Absolutely.
But it's a fascinating study. We'll be back in just a moment. You've heard the term, we are in this world, but we are not of this world. We're pilgrims passing through. Our citizenship is in heaven. Well, that's the meaning of Zayin, the seventh letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and that's the subject we see here in the 7th chapter of Revelation, in the 144,000 and in the innumerable host of Gentiles that are seen in the latter half of this chapter. We are not of this world. We are in the world, but not of the world, basically, is I think what it's saying.
And I think it's of great interest while we're talking about the Hebrew designation of Zayin, which denotes the number 7. It is also the Hebrew noun for weapon. It's the ordinary Hebrew word that means weapon, and therefore it can be used to refer to a sword. And I like to think of it here as the sword of the Spirit, going forth to do the work of the Lord. And as we have talked about Revelation 7 in the past, J.R., we've often compared it with the 7th chapter of John. In fact, there is a point-by-point comparison as you go through the books of John and Revelation, paralleling them. There's an amazing parallel between the two books.
In the Gospel of John, chapter 7, Jesus goes up to Jerusalem and to the temple during the Festival of Tabernacles, Sukkot, as it is called in Hebrew. And Gary, when we see these Gentiles in verse 9 with palm branches in their hands,
yes,
that is the Feast of Tabernacles ritual.
Absolutely. And Tabernacles, by the way, one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, is a very important festival because it celebrates the bringing in of the kingdom. And after the 4 angels hold back the 4 winds in preparation for that which is about to happen, the thing which is going to happen is the bringing in of the kingdom. This is the subject.
Mm-hmm. The bringing in of the kingdom, and we have the 144,000 who have a special work assigned to them through the tribulation period. And then we have this innumerable multitude of Gentiles that are saved out of the tribulation period. And Gary, when Jesus spoke in the temple during the Feast of Tabernacles, first of all, he went up under cover, and he stood up in the midst of, that is after about 3.5 days, he stood up and revealed himself. And to me, that's maybe the Jews accepting Jesus as the Messiah, especially these 144,000, who are righteous Jews, but not saved, therefore left behind in the rapture, and then realize that Jesus really is the Messiah, as Jesus went to the Feast of Tabernacles and proclaimed. And the interesting thing also is that the Pharisees wanted to have him arrested. The temple guards went to arrest him, came back and said, "We couldn't arrest him. No man ever spoke like this man."
That's right. And J.R., in John 7, Jesus stands up at the last day of the feast, and he says, "If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink." And he furthermore said, "He that believeth on me, as the Scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water." That's John 7, 37 and 38. And he was announcing that he was the Messiah, the King, come back to do the work of establishing the kingdom. And in so doing, he divided Israel right down the middle. There were those on one side who said, "This man, it can't be the Messiah." And there were some who believed. Well, J.R., this is, I think, going to be the position of the 144,000. They are going to be right at that dividing line between belief and unbelief as they do the work of the Lord.
Now, I want you to notice when they sent the soldiers to arrest Jesus and they came back, there was a question on their minds, and this is what they said. Then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go? Because Jesus had just said, you shall seek me and not find me, and where I am, thither you cannot come. He says, I'm with you only a little while, and then I'll be gone. And they said, where's he going? Will he go to the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? And Gary, that is exactly what we see here in Revelation chapter 7. So John's view and subject of chapter 7 in the Gospel of John, speaking of his first advent, is a prophetic overview of the 7th chapter in the book of Revelation and a future event when indeed Gentiles are going to hear the gospel during the tribulation period.
J.R., as we make this broadcast, world events are decidedly turning against Israel. There is, alas, a growing anti-Semitism rearing its ugly head in the world today. And I dare say that as we approach the events of Revelation, that anti-Semitism is going to become even more pronounced. And these 144,000 represent a new dispensation. They represent the time when Israel will be made head of the nations. Right now we're in the church age. We are right on the cusp of a new dispensation. And I think the 144,000 represent the vanguard of that new dispensation, J.R.
Now, just before we get into the events of the day of wrath, these 144,000 righteous Jews, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, will be sealed with a special seal of God. In chapter 14, we're told that it is the name of the Father. Here we are told that it is a mark in their foreheads, sealed in their foreheads. Gary, let's go back to Ezekiel for a moment and review the time when a mark was placed upon the foreheads of the righteous Jews in Jerusalem of his day.
That's right. A supernatural mark, a protective mark was placed upon the righteous Jews. And J.R., in the Hebrew, the name of that mark is Tav. That is in the text. And Tav, in its original form, was a cross, literally the symbol of the crucifixion of Christ, or the work of redemption. And I think that mark has to be similar here.
Isn't it amazing? You know, in times past, if a man couldn't write his name, they'd have him put an X in the place of his signature. And I think that goes back into antiquity to this very thing, the Tav. And by the way, the Tav in the Greek is Omega. So when Jesus says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, what he's saying is, I'm the Aleph and the Tav.
Right.
And so we have here the symbol of the name of the Messiah himself and the name of his Father in the foreheads of these men. And what is so remarkable is it's the sign of the cross.
And they're going forth to fight. They are marked in a very special way. I think they're spirit-filled in a very special way. And J.R., I want to just emphasize one thing here. In verse 4 of Revelation 7, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. These are Israelites. These are, well, using the modern name, Israelis.
Yes.
That may gall some people, but these people are genetically the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And J.R., they have been preserved all these centuries to do the work that God told Abraham would be finished. And here we find them getting ready to do that work.
Yes. Now, Ephraim is left out, Dan is left out. But the list as it appears here, Joseph is placed in the place of Ephraim, so I really think Ephraim is there, though given a different name. Ephraim means multiplication, Joseph means adding, so it's very similar meaning to the name. And I think it means that though they'll be winning a lot of people, their harvest will not be as great as if it were Ephraim. It will just be an addition rather than a multiplication. But now, these names are situated in a special way. They are listed in a particular way so as to reveal a special message. I want us to take a quick look at this, and we'll talk about it more on the next program. Judah, Reuben, Gad, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, in that order. And Gary, I know we don't have time to get into the individual meanings right now, but let's just give a brief overview of what this says. Joseph Seiss wrote a book called The Apocalypse, wherein he deciphered the message as confessors or praisers of God, looking upon the Son, a band of blessed ones, wrestling with forgetfulness, hearing and obeying the word, cleaving unto the reward of a shelter and home. An addition, sons of the day, of God's right hand, begotten in the extremity of the age. What a message. We'll tell you what it means on the next program. We'll be back in just a moment.